This this is the Impressions Exchange podcast.
Impressions Exchange podcast,
where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews.
Hi, I'm Denise Gustafson, Editorial Director for Printing United Alliance, and the guest host for the special Printing Impressions podcast series in celebration of Women's History Month, highlighting women in the printing industry. During this series, I'll have the opportunity to talk with women from all segments of the industry about their experiences and their journey as a woman in the industry. So today I want to welcome Kristi Duvall. She's Vice President of Sales with The Boxmaker. So Kristi, welcome.
Thank you, Denise. Glad to be here.
To get us started, can you give me a little bit of information about The Boxmaker and what you do with them?
The Boxmaker is a packaging company based in Seattle, Washington. We manufacture custom corrugated boxes. We fabricate foam for blocking and bracing, and we do distribution of general packaging supplies. But related to printing, we operate two of the highest capacity all digital plants for corrugated boxes and displays, with production in Seattle and also in Lowell, Arkansas.
Very interesting. So what do you do as Vice President of Sales? I'm guessing you're responsible for all of the sales. Is that how it works?
We actually have three distinct sales channels. I lead the enterprise sales channel, so I lead the direct sales force that works directly with brands. And then there's also a trade channel, so we do support the trade. And then we have a web to print business called Fantastipack. My team is primarily, I have sales managers and the enterprise team, and then I also lead structural design, pricing, and client services.
So how did you get started in printing and packaging?
So it all started when I responded to an ad in the newspaper, long before there were job boards and Indeed and all of that stuff. At the time, I was selling corporate relocation. I saw an ad in the paper for selling boxes, and I thought, how hard could that be? And that was 25 years ago. I remember parts of the interview process with the manager at the time that I was interviewing, and it was a different company. By the time I got to the third interview, he said, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I said, well, packaging looks like a stepping stone in my career, so I don't plan on being in it for very long. And he said, don't tell anybody you ever said that, you're hired. That was 25 years ago.
So a stepping stone. It's a rather large stepping continent at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I loved winter sports and skiing, and I just thought, well, I was just going to get out of corporate relocation and maybe sell boxes for a couple of years and go work in the outdoor industry, and ended up, I love packaging. I have grown so much in the past 20 some years, and there's so many windows of opportunity for growth within the industry and so many facets to it. There's nothing else I would want to do.
I was going to say, what made you stay? If you thought you weren't going to stay, obviously you came to love it, but what was it specifically?
It's never boring. It's always different. When you're a packaging salesperson, you're on the street, you're in front of customers. If you're a curious person and you're always looking for opportunities to learn, and it's sort of like living a real life episode of how it's made. You get to go into factories and see how customers make product, and we help them solve problems.
Obviously, coming from a completely different industry, you had a lot of training to do about the industry and the technology and everything that goes into building a package. So what role for you did maybe formal and informal education and training play in your development?
So I'm passionate about training and learning. Starting out, it was just when I started out with learning packaging in general, a lot of it was internal training, handed me a fiberboard handbook, hand me a stack of brochures and telling me to go make calls. To be honest, I'm not even sure. I didn't have formal sales training at that point. I was just, if I look back, I was really taking orders. I was taking samples from customers, bringing them back to the office, somebody have a spec it out, and then returning a quote. And when I came to the Boxmaker is when I first received formal sales training. Like the company invested in sales training. The Boxmaker already had an internal onboarding curriculum full of product training, process training, manufacturing, understanding the different presses. And then just the box maker in general is a trailblazer when it comes to digital print and packaging and technology. I would say all of the internal training on the product and the processes, I've gained so much from working at Boxmaker. And then me personally, I wanted to develop myself into a leader. I was passionate about paying it forward. I've had the opportunity to work for great managers. And so I've invested in executive coaching that helped me gain presence and ability to do public speaking and that sort of thing.
Really, really cool. It's interesting just to see the different ways that people learn about the industry. Like you said, it wasn't until you got to really the box maker that you had that more formal training in terms of sales.
Mhm.
It's always interesting to see where people come from and how they build upon what they know. Thinking about your career, is there any particular accomplishment or projects that you've handled that specifically stand out in your mind?
There are a couple things. When I was a salesperson for the box maker, it was 2008. So I'd been with the company for a couple of years. At the time, I landed the company's biggest prospect, which became the biggest account. I learned about process improvement. I learned Kaizen by working on site in the customer's facility. And while most of my peers in the sales team were seeing huge declines because of the 2008 downturn, I tripled my income. I went on to commission because I took business from a competitor. And I kept that account for 8 years. And I learned so much about inner workings of manufacturing and understanding how to work with different departments. And as a salesperson, I became the liaison between the customer's own departments. I was good at communicating between those different departments inside the customer. So that would be one big thing that I was super proud of. And then I would say something that really changed the trajectory on my career was winning the Women in Wide Format Award in 2021.
So why did that change your trajectory?
I learned about a whole side of printing that I really didn't know a lot about and didn't really understand. And I got exposed to Big Picture magazine. Actually, a coworker nominated me
Hmm.
for the award. I didn't even know this award existed. And then I met these amazing women who are in all facets of printing. And I knew about commercial printing, but I didn't know much else. And now understanding more about wraps and display, retail display, that sort of thing was really eye-opening. And then becoming part of this community. I just got a full exposure. And then because of that, I was also asked to be on panels and people wanted to ask me questions about it. And before that, I was really intimidated about public speaking, but I wanted to improve my public speaking skills. So I really pushed myself. I had an executive coach at the time, and I really pushed myself to learn how to become a more confident public speaker, which, if it's not the most feared thing by many people, it's got to be up there.
It's
And
definitely up there.
yeah, it really pushed me out of my comfort zone in the best way.
How important is that networking to you now?
I rely on my network on a regular basis. Every time I'm trying to think about trying something new or looking for inspiration or innovative ideas, I know I have many people, and particularly many women that I can call on, but I also have many men that I can call upon in the network too to support me, be a good sponsor, and give me good advice, get me
Mhm.
out of my own way.
And get you out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
How important is it for the industry to be inclusive, to have the women in it, to have the different voices? So, women, men, different races, different ages. How important is it for that kind of inclusivity and diversity?
If we don't have it, it's a very closed-minded path forward.
Mhm.
And you need diversity of thought. You need fresh ideas. I've had many discussions with people that have talked about the difficulty in attracting talent in general to our industry, let alone diversity of talent. I've been hiring salespeople, or at least part of the hiring process for salespeople at my own company for years. And in 2023, we asked HR, how can we make these ads more inclusive? Because we were getting a stereotypical applicant for a printing sales role. We made adjustments, but we still had very few applicants that were diverse.
I think printing is such a hard industry because I know for you in packaging, it is still, there's a lot of men
Mhm.
still in the packaging industry. Same thing with commercial. It's still very heavily male. Other industries, other verticals, it's changing. There are women in wide format and apparel. You do
Mhm.
see implants. We see a lot of women across some of those other verticals. But you try to do the ad differently to get more inclusivity, to get more diversity. Is the problem the ad or is it the industry? I know that's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question. I mean, it's probably a combination of both.
Hmm.
I did a presentation a couple of years ago talking about how much do kids in high school or in college programs even know about printing? It's this whole universe that exists. It's definitely they're exposed to it in their everyday life. Walk down a grocery store aisle or inside of a big box store, and it impacts people's decision to make a purchase. But understanding how much of this whole universe exists, and I think it's a challenge for many industries, not just printing.
Hmm.
Uh, but printing and packaging doesn't sound sexy. There are not a lot of programs that direct the next generation to choose careers in printing or even give them exposure. I mean, there is Manufacturing Day that takes place in October every year, but you're still reaching a small, probably tenth of a percentage of the population that even knows about that day and companies that even celebrate and participate in it. And I will say, yes, our industry as a whole is lots of men. I read a statistic recently where packaging and printing companies are typically owned by a mid to late 50s white male. And I will say, I have the pleasure of working with some of the greatest men. I have great men on my team, and I have made an effort to put more diversity in my team, whether it through ethnicity or age.
It's tough though. And like you said, print is like the best kept secret, is what I keep saying. It's almost as if people just don't see print because they're exposed to it in so many different places. I mean, like you said, you walk into a grocery store, it's everywhere. Imagine trying to find yogurt if there was no print on anything. Basically what the package might look like, but maybe it's not yogurt, maybe it's cottage cheese, because you just don't have that label on it. Yeah, imagine a world without printing, that you didn't have mail, that you didn't have signs that tell you if a business is open or closed, or even what the business is. It's interesting to think of it that way because I think because it's everywhere, people just don't see it anymore.
And I do think that packaging had its moment. Influencers emerged in the mid 2010s. Hard to
Hmm.
believe it's been almost 10 years.
Indeed.
And also because of the pandemic, packaging connecting consumers to brands and arriving at their doorstep, it definitely had its moment. So I think there is so much more opportunity. And I guess that's one way for us to look at it is there's still a ton of opportunity for us to engage more people, attract a more diverse talent pool, and give people opportunities to learn about it.
Indeed. Now, in terms of your career path, have you had the opportunity to mentor other women? I know you say you try to hire a diverse range of people. For the women specifically, is there any specific advice that you try to give to them as they're trying to navigate a world which is still old white guy kind of?
Yes, I definitely mentor other women. I also mentor men in my company too. So it's not just women. I try to be a good sponsor for those that want to advance their careers into leadership or management, or you just help them understand some of the different things about the differences between being, say, a salesperson or being somebody who works in customer service or a structural designer, and what kind of decisions do I have to make as a manager. So I'm really passionate about coaching. In fact, I am an executive coach also on the side. So I'm really passionate about coaching, which is more about asking questions. And mentorship is really sharing those stories and engaging in a conversation. And I would say that the people that I spend the most time mentoring just happen to be women because they ask for my time. And a lot of what we talk about is navigating some of the difficulties between the different layers of an organization and knowing how and when to speak up and making sure they feel comfortable taking up space in a room, but also not pushing it too far. It's a balance. It's a balancing act all the time, and also educating them on the financial side of the business. I think a lot of times as women, I don't want to stereotype, but a lot of times we tend to focus on the soft side, the soft skills, because it's more natural for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
But also making sure we have that balance of understanding the financial side of the business, understanding P&Ls and how those things have to they force us to make hard decisions sometimes, and making sure they have a balanced view and it's not all just about the soft stuff.
It's definitely a balancing act no matter what. But yeah, you're right. Women tend to be a lot better with some of the softer things because that seems to be more of our makeup and the
Mhm,
qualities that we have.
mhm.
Why is it so important for there to be women in leadership roles within the printing industry?
I think that we bring a different perspective. A lot of times we're also talking about the people aspect of the business. In order to have a successful business, you need to have people and they need to feel like they're part of the process. They need to feel like they're heard. You need to have consistent communication on a regular basis, much more so than you might think. As leaders, we're thinking about stuff over and over again, and we're not realizing how many times we didn't say it out loud. And I forget what the stat is, but I think people need to hear something 7 times for it to really click.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to have people part of the process, having communication and communicating that vision and how each person in the organization connects to that vision so that they feel connected and they can really help push those things forward.
So we already touched on some of the qualities.
Mhm,
Obviously, we have some of the natural abilities.
mhm.
There's a certain amount of confidence that we all need to build in. Are there any particular qualities that really make women good leaders?
One of the things I think that makes me a good leader is I'm a great listener. I'm willing to listen to all feedback, even sometimes when it's negative. Listen to it, apply the things that are important to apply going forward. I think when your team gives you feedback that's constructive, taking action on those things and allowing them to see those put into action, I think is really important because they'll be more bought in and more supportive of any changes going forward. I think people can't be what they can't see. And we need to have more women in leadership roles because we do bring a different aspect to leadership.
I do agree. And a lot of women that I talk to agree as well that the diversity of voices is what makes a company stronger, especially in its C-suite and some of those leadership roles.
And I will say, when I was promoted to vice president of sales, I was surprised at the women in my company who reached out and said, wow, this is a really big deal. Because I don't think I realized, even at that point, that because there were no women in executive leadership at the company at the time, maybe those women didn't feel heard or seen. And when I got promoted into this role, it made a huge difference for them about maybe that could be me someday.
Mhm. You need to be able to see yourself in some of those positions to know that, oh yeah, I can reach out for that as well. I can be that maybe it's 10 years from now, but there's a career path. Now, you mentioned something about balancing acts in terms of working with, the soft side of things, knowing also the data and the financial side of things. But now with women, there's a certain way that we have a balancing act with work and personal life. Many of us have families, some might be raising children or want to raise children, but we also want a career.
Mhm,
And sometimes those seem to be at odds with each other.
mhm.
How do you balance those demands of having a career versus having a family or a personal life?
Wow, it's such a big question.
I know.
I would say earlier in my career, I was probably a workaholic.
Mhm.
Not probably, I was a workaholic. I worked 60, 70 hours, didn't think twice about it. My husband came second and he knew it. And I don't have children, but my reps are my reps in some way are my children.
Mhm.
Because I care about them like my own. And I would say over the last 3 years, I've changed my priorities. I think coming out of the pandemic, I think it made a lot of us reevaluate what's important in life. Spending more time with my husband became a priority. So I take time to plan every single week. And I plan both personal and professional things into the same calendar. I still certainly put in more than 40 hours a week. That's the role I've taken on by choice, and I love it. But I would say the way I balance it is I used to compartmentalize, and I don't anymore. I'm the same person at work as I am at home. And I need to put those into the same planning and the same calendar to make sure I balance those things out. And for me, I have to work out 3 to 5 days a week, and I don't schedule any early morning meetings if I can, because my workouts have to come first. Because if I'm not 100%, I'm not going to be able to give 100% or be there for my team.
Yeah. And that's an important thing to be able to deal with that self-care as well. Like you said, if you can't care for yourself, then how do you care for others? You make time for the things that really matter in terms of
Yeah.
family and personal life.
And like one of the things that my husband, I think, finally started to speak up, or I would read his body language. And so now, like between 5 and 8, I'm not on my phone.
Hmm.
I'm there with him and we're watching TV or having dinner or whatever. We had some hard times because I did not make him a priority, but I've made the choice to make my family time a priority. I tend to come last, even though my workouts I'm pretty good about. There's other things that are definitely suffering. So it's always a work in progress. Progress, not perfection.
Yeah, indeed. In terms of the future, what trends do you foresee in the printing and packaging industry, and how might they impact women's roles within the industry?
I think that as an industry, we will increase the diversity of people that work within the industry all the way from the production floor up to the executive level. It's obviously going to take a lot longer than I think many people would like it to be, but I think that over time, we're going to attract a more diverse talent pool. They're going to have different skills, different experiences. Even the younger people that I'm hiring into sales roles today, they bring a totally different perspective about work and sales than they did even 5 to 10 years ago. And so I think that will continue to increase. How do I think that will impact the industry as a whole? I think it'll make it more exciting over time, place to work that fosters creativity and really strong, cohesive teams
Hmm.
that will be able to execute fun and exciting things that actually affect our culture.
I think it'll be also interesting to watch in the coming years as we have new people entering, maybe even from different industries and bringing their, especially the young folks. I feel like I'm an old guy, those young whippersnappers.
I
Um,
know.
the younger generations as they're coming in, they're digital natives. They learn a different way. They think a very different way. It's going to be really interesting to see how they impact some of those who are longer term employees with well, we've always done it this way. This is the way this XYZ is done. But then you have new people coming in with, well, what about this? I think it'll be really interesting to see how the new ideas will start to trickle upward into some of the more long-term employees.
We have lived through that challenge. I mean, I feel like my whole career at Boxmaker has been about that, but I would say over the last 10 years, I've seen a significant change where there was this big rub between the people that had been with the company for 20 plus years,
Hmm.
and you had these people who were like 5 years and less, and they're going, yeah, but this is the way the rest of the world works. And these people that have been at this company for a really long time, and you don't want to discount all of the contributions they've made within that time, but it's definitely pushed us as an organization, and it's definitely pushed me as a leader because now I'm in a position where I'm really trying to push forward. And particularly over the last couple of years, I've had to manage through change. And I
Hmm.
was having a conversation with our president recently, and I said, all of the change management that I have had to manage through transitions and managers within my team, retirements of reps that have been with the company for 25 to 30 years, transitions in adopting technology in our organization. I said, unfortunately, none of that really shows up anywhere. It doesn't show up in any real metrics.
Yeah. And with some of those people that are retiring, how is that knowledge getting replaced? Is it getting replaced? That's the other piece of it, that ingrained knowledge that they've learned over those 20, 30, 40 years. What happens?
Yeah, we've adopted and we've had it in place for a really long time, is a transition plan.
Hmm.
So particularly with our retiring reps, at the time I was running the Seattle region, which is our biggest market, and I had about half of the sales team retire over a period of 3 or 4 years.
Ooh,
And so, yeah, so we implemented a formalized transition program. So the outgoing reps basically had 6 to 12 months to transition their accounts. A new person, either already on the team or we hired new people to be part of that transition. So they got side by side learning with those outgoing reps. And also I had manager transitions very similar. They have extended transitions where they meet every week. They go out and meet the clients together. That's how we've kept some of the knowledge. Although, as I've been talking about it with some of the newer members of my team, it doesn't matter how much learning and training I'm going to give them or send them to, it's not likely they're going to catch up.
hmm.
Myself and a few other managers on my team, we've been in the industry for more than 20 years. And some of the newer people that I've hired, they might work for another 10 or 15 years. They're probably never going to catch up.
Yeah.
But I think we do a pretty good job of training and having curriculum and having a lot of information that is recorded on video. That's the biggest thing for us. We have a lot of short videos that are recorded, and then it's just real life exposure, getting in the car and riding around with people.
Yeah, it's good. I don't know how many people have those kind of transition plans. Obviously, you guys had to, with having
Mhm.
so many decide to retire all at
Yeah.
within a short period of time.
Yeah.
But I mean, in addition to, we always talk about like succession plans for owners, but in some
Mhm.
cases, you need that for some of your, even your long-term employees in certain key positions.
Mhm.
They might not be C-suite, but they could be leaders, team leaders, or whatnot.
I
It,
lived through several transitions at Boxmaker where we didn't have good transition plans in place, and they were incredibly painful.
yeah,
And now, as a company, we either have or we are putting into place things for all key positions, whether it's in executive management or not.
yeah, it's important to do. So, knowing what you know now, based on your experience in the industry, your career, what advice would you give yourself if you were just starting out now?
I would give myself the same advice I gave myself when every time I face some form of adversity, I ask myself if I would regret not taking a chance. And if I'm going to regret it, then I should take the opportunity and learn from it.
Good advice for anyone.
Yeah. And that has stuck with me for decades, and I still use it today.
Awesome. Kristi, it was a pleasure talking with you today. So thank you so much for spending some time with me and talking about a bunch of different topics. So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Denise. I really appreciate it.